welcome to Tea and Stuff. I got Shawn from Woven Roots Tea Crafts with me. We've had to restart and start back up the podcast a few times now, so I've already asked this question a few times, so I'll just reintroduce it a better way. Is why don't you explain Woven Roots Tea Crafts?
Totally. So Woven Roots Tea Crafts is, it started off with just my woodworking. So I wanted to start making like tea tables, tea trays, and tea scoops or chahas. And I took a step back and realized that this venture that I was just starting I'm selling woodworking stuff that I'm making, but it's handcrafted products for Gong Fu Cha. And being able to take that step back, I realized I can explore working with other artists and working with other materials. Like one of my friends is a glass blower, and that's this lotus here, he made that. And so I've commissioned a batch of glass blown teacups from him. And
those teacups, by the way.
Yeah, he did a great job. I need to upload the rest of them to the website, because part of me just like doesn't want to, because I want to hold on to them. But I need to get these things out there. I really enjoy seeing other people like using these. Like there's a gentleman who won. I did a giveaway for one of the glass blown teacups, and this guy's using it all the time and tagging me, and it brings so much joy that it's cool that this guy's getting a lot of use out of it. I believe his Instagram account it's always tea o'clock.
Oh yeah, I'm aware. That very familiar. So you already had, when did you learn woodworking? Like, start with, I mean, where'd you learn that skill? Because that's quite a skill. That's not something you pick up on a weekend and then master.
Right. Yeah. Woodworking definitely takes a long time to master. So I've grown up around residential construction since I was a kid. So like remodel for apartments and houses, as well as like building houses. My dad and my brother were in that line of work for a while. Or my dad, did like all of our home remodels. It was him and me helping him on the weekend and stuff like that. So I grew up being familiar with all the tools. But when it came to like craft woodworking, like making furniture, tables, trays, and all these other things, I would say I'm relatively new to the field. It all started about almost 2 years ago. It was COVID. Everything was kind of up in the air. My life trajectory, my plans were just gone.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people can relate there. But I found this beautiful piece of driftwood just hanging out on the beach, and I immediately just was captivated by it. And I saw, just like from the flow of it, that it would be a beautiful tea table. But I didn't know anything about like fine woodworking at that point. And so I took it to my brother, who walked me through the process, and he helped me make it. And then I just like met someone who's now my really good friend, who has a wood shop, and he's just like, just come on by whenever you want. And the more I started working on things and building things and just like posting little Instagram stories, more people were like, oh dude, are you making things? Like, I would buy a tea tray from you, or I would buy a tea scoop or something. It's like, oh, maybe I can turn this into something. What went from like a sort of like dabbling a little bit because of COVID and nothing else was going on, to maybe I can really turn this into viable business. So yeah.
Oops, go ahead.
So that's a long way of me saying, like, I don't actually have a background in fine woodworking, but I think what really helped out with this is I have a background in mechanical engineering. So I have a lot of experience with like design and manufacturing and all that.
And just being around like all of the, not necessarily just woodworking, but all of the different carpentry stuff, like you pick up little things here and there. That's really interesting. So then you kind of put that all together. You sort of started with the tea trays.
Yeah. I originally was starting with like the small Gong Fu trays. That was where my passion was at the initial point. But then um, the more I looked into woodworking, I just realized like I wanted to build larger tables and that there was a space for it. A lot of people that practice the side handle tea ceremony, if you're familiar with that, or if you're familiar with Global Tea Hut,
Mhm.
um, yeah, that practice, a lot of people like using large tables. And so I was like, oh, there's potentially a market for me to make large pieces of furniture, but also like small trays like this and explore different draining options. Um, so yeah.
Gong Fu Trays, man. If that's one thing that a lot of people ask, they're like, "Oh, I really like your table." They're like, "Where can I get one like this?" And it's like you either have to import it yourself, which
Yep.
is, I mean, super expensive on top of the cost of the tray, and then there's having someone make it for you or making it yourself. And I go, depending on what country you're in and how much you're willing to spend and who you know, like if you do know somebody who's a good woodworker and you could commission to have them make you a tray, that might be a way better route than importing something, because then at least you can give points on what you want to be there and what not to be there. So even if you maybe pay the same or more, at least
Mhm.
then you've gotten it super custom made to how you want it.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm really excited to do some custom work, but also explore building tables and designing things with different aesthetics. Because as you've probably seen with tea trays, is when you get it from China, most of the time it's made out of bamboo, which is a great. It's it's not a wood, it's a reed. It is great for the application of Gong Fu Cha and dumping hot water and tea on it because um, just because of the properties of the bamboo itself versus, let's say, hardwoods
Right.
that don't respond to water as well. And so it's taken me a lot of time to research and test different kinds of wood finish to help protect the wood. Um, but also, it's like I wanted to do Gong Fu Cha trays because I wanted to explore different aesthetics. So, for instance, like this table I'm on right now, it's for let's say like dry pouring, or I've heard some people say like modern Gong Fu Cha. But then like here's like a live edge tray with
Oh.
like a design in the middle. And the cool thing about this and doing custom work is this is just an image file that I found online, and just putting it into a few I might have to put it into one or two different photo editing softwares to get the right image file to import it into this other software. But then I can tell machine to just cut this out in the wood. Or I can work with people and design like custom things to put in the tea trays. Um, so that's what I'm really excited about doing. Um, yeah, it's fun testing all this out and talking to different woodworkers, because I'll go into lumber yards or like Woodcraft or Rockler, which are two supply stores for woodworkers. I'm like, yeah, I need help protecting wood from boiling hot water, and every single time everyone's like, "You're doing what?"
What are you doing?
Yeah, yeah. The look of one of the guys that runs a lumber yard I go to, he's just like, why the hell would you put boiling hot water on wood? And I'm like, it's really hard to describe, man. It's for tea. And he's still just like, he doesn't get it. So that's been a long journey, is like figuring out how to protect the wood. Yeah, it's been fun.
Have you experimented with the resin filling at all?
I did a little bit. One of the first small tabletops I made was actually a little clear resin pour. Um, yeah, that is a deep world of woodworking. It's very popular these days, like the rivet
Very.
tables. I'm not as interested in doing the epoxy work. It is great for filling like large cracks or voids in the wood to help preserve its integrity. Um, but honestly, I don't really want to spend a lot of my time doing the deep epoxy pours that you may see, or coating the table in an epoxy like top coat. Um, just like it encases the wooden plastic, and to me
Yep.
it creates this barrier between me and the natural piece of wood. Um,
No,
that
I, I get that. Like, you know what I mean? If there were like like a rubber type layer over the top of this exact tray, it wouldn't feel exactly the same. It like I
Mhm.
get it. For me, I like that little feel of the wood. Like I know that this is wood. I know what I'm touching. I like the surface. I like even like with the stone. It's like I like to know that the stone's there.
Mhm.
It sometimes if you I think it can create a separation, and then it also for some people brings in an issue of purity.
Yeah,
Where I
yeah,
mean, you're right. I mean, epoxies, these are all chemical. A lot of these are chemicals. So,
that too.
is that something that you want? Uh, is that something that you want to have involved in your tea time?
Mhm. Yeah, and that was something I had to ask myself earlier on, because I've seen some beautiful epoxy tables where they're even doing like one layer at a time. Have you seen those where they paint like koi fish and put
No.
rocks in? Oh, it's beautiful. They use clear epoxy, so it looks like you're looking into a river, and they'll paint um, like different like kelp or fish in with the different layers of epoxy, so it gives it like a three-dimensional effect.
Oh my
Um,
god, I haven't
yes,
seen that at all. What is
it's
that? What if I were to try to look that up? What would that be called?
oof, that is a good one. Yeah, it's definitely more on the line of epoxy working. Um, but yeah, I would look up like yeah, epoxy river table like with fish, something like that. Um, yeah, I've seen some really creative ones too. Like there's this other guy that made one. Um, are you familiar with the trench run in Star Wars?
Yes.
Yeah, so someone did an epoxy pour where he put little Star Wars miniature like ships in, and so it looks like it's the Star Wars, like that scene in Star Wars where they're going through the trench run. Um, so yeah, there's some cool stuff out
That
there.
so let me so what's been your current choice for water protecting the table? Like what is the current thing that you choose to use?
Yeah, it's a multi-part system. It's kind of like a mixture of like polyurethane lacquer, but it's I do between 3 and 4, sometimes maybe 5 coats of something called a hard sealer. Um, and I might do more coats depending on how porous the wood is. And so the initial steps are like trying to penetrate as deep into the wood as possible and kind of fill up those pores so that the water doesn't get in. And then putting in a few layers of like a floor finish. Um, it's something that is like almost marine grade. So it is, since it's meant for floors, it's very strong, it's very sturdy. And I've chosen to go with not as like high sheen or gloss, which to me makes it look too reflective. Um, but it needs it's going to be a little bit reflective regardless, because that's just part of the what's in the wood finish and helping protect the wood. But that definitely takes like a week to do it, because I usually wait 12 to 18 hours between each coat, and it's a process. um, but I've noticed that works pretty well.
So you for your sourcing for like do you have areas where you can go buy these like large slabs of wood, or do you have to, or not have to, but do you go like scavenge for them? Do you do both?
Do a little bit of both. Luckily, there's a really awesome lumber yard in Denver that gets some local woods, but a lot of exotic woods. I so for the viewers, I live in Colorado, so high elevation, really dry, so we don't have access to a whole like a large diversity of species of trees here. So this one lumberyard gets a lot of wood from the coasts, as well as like importing from
Ooh.
certain countries around the world. Um, but I've found a few other lumberyards that deal with a lot like only local um, species of wood, and it's really sustainable because what I found out is like a lot of arborists that cut trees down, those just end up in the landfill. Like there's nothing they can do with them, so they just take it to the dump. And so people have started businesses where they work with these arborists to get these huge logs, and then they can turn them into usable lumber for woodworkers like myself. So I like to use a mixture of both.
Wow. What a wasteful like
Yeah.
wow, that's more weight. Like you think about like I sometimes I see like paper, like you get like that junk mail, and I'm like, what a waste, what a waste.
Mhm.
Think about just whole giant trees just cut down and like
Yeah.
whatever.
And that's the sad thing is like that's happening here in Colorado where there's not that many trees. But if you go to somewhere like the Pacific Northwest, where, so many trees everywhere and not enough people to turn it into usable lumber, um, it just goes into landfill. Or a little bit better, it hurts me as a woodworker a little bit that they threw it through the chipper. So they, create mulch out of it. But I'm like, oh, it's like a beautiful piece that I could turn into like furniture or something.
what
And
I
not
what I what I could do with that opposed to what it's being used for.
right. Yeah. But it's like I can't use everything. And yeah. But yeah, I scavenge some stuff too. Like if I'm on a hike or something, I'll find like sometimes I found some beautiful branches that I would turn into I think beautiful tea scoops, or coasters or other things.
The scoops. Oh, that's so the trays were beautiful, but the some of the scoops, man, they are. And I mean, some people would go, "Oh, scoop's a scoop," or like, I have a bunch of different styles of them, like wood and not wood. But like the ones that I have that are wood are very mass made, cheap. There's no spirit to those.
Hmm.
I look at the ones that you have, and not only is the appearance more beautiful, but because the craftsmanship's there, I know that one day I have to up my presentation vessel game, because it's like it is just such an important piece, especially when you do like Gong Fu tastings where you are presenting stuff to people, where it's like, if I just have my just regular, what is it, kind of triangle looking porcelain thing, I mean, it's nice. You can see the
Hmm.
leaves in it, but the vessel itself is kind of dead in a
Hmm.
sense. And when I guess when you're sitting down with people and you really are trying to share like every good essence that can come from this experience, I mean, something as small as your tea scoop is actually can be a pretty important. And I don't think enough people I don't think enough people not only don't sell but don't make them like you do.
Hmm.
Like I mean, some artists like way over in China or wherever, you'll see some, artisan scoops and stuff they make, but yours are like uh something else. Uh
Yeah. Well,
and
thank you.
and to hear, I mean, to hear that you don't have a larger history in woodworking is pretty surprising to me. Um it's it's something that I have like dabbled in like in high school and like tech class and all that stuff, but taking it to a serious level, and I've seen just what goes into that, and I don't think I have it within me to even do half of what you've done. So sometimes I look at like accomplishments like you have with your vessels and trays, and it's out of this world. Like, so it's more funny for me to hear you be like, yeah, no, I'm not like a trained, because it's just like, man, that even more like blows my mind of just the craftsmanship and the skill that goes into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Even
so
even
much.
even if you don't have this super long education in it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for the kind words. Yeah, the engineering background definitely helps out with it because I've been around like precision machine parts and working with like really tight tolerances. So it's a blessing and a curse. My friend who I work in his wood shop, like there's times where he'll catch me just like trying to make, like I'm trying to flatten out a piece of lumber, and I'm like, oh, it needs to be perfectly flat. Um, and he's like, no, it doesn't. Like wood moves. Like wood,
It's
and I'm like, I'm trying to get like release that of like building something to like 0.001 inch tolerance because that's what I'm used to doing. So it's like releasing that pressure to put on myself is allowing me to create a lot more. But also having that pressure has also like I think helped um, my tolerance for like what would be considered like sellable per se. Um,
yeah.
so, but like yeah, like what you mentioned that there's not a whole lot of people out there making tea scoops. Um, there
Or
are
trays.
yeah, there are some people in Europe, but yeah, there's I know Mark Moeller. He's made a few beautiful tea scoops, um, but yeah, I see like a little bit of people like making their own scoops in the U.S. But other than yeah, that I haven't seen any other sellers.
It's I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, for a
Uh,
while, like I have one of these that you were talking about. Yeah,
they
and it really
work. It's
yeah
not like it's not like it doesn't do the job, but
yeah
if it's the difference between having a fully handmade Yixing teapot and a teapot that was put together by a machine. They
mhm,
both serve a purpose. It's not that the machine one can't make good tea ever, but it's I mean, I know from experience that you hold this handmade piece in this hand and you hold the machine made piece in this hand, and there's if you want to be as silly as to break it down to like spirit or whatever or energy,
mhm.
I always feel a bit metaphysical, but it is like I think that the craftsmanship, not only is there a person that's making it with the skill of a human brain, but I really do think that there's a lot of intention that gets transferred when somebody makes something like that.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I didn't start experiencing that until I was starting up my tea game from mass produced Gaiwans to more handcrafted Gaiwans. I know I'm saying that I'm using probably a mass produced Gaiwan right now. Um, but yeah, I know what you're saying. It's like you're feeling the intention behind it. And now that I like since I started down this path and I'm meeting up with other woodworkers to check out their craft, it's like I feel it like from them and seeing like custom furniture or even just like they made their own butcher blocks or cutting boards. It's just it's so different than and then I walk into like even just like a high end uh, kitchen supply store and I go into the back and I look at their cutting boards and it's like you can just feel the difference. Like well, it doesn't help that it's also like vacuum packed in plastic and it's got a sticker on it and all that. But yeah, it definitely feels different. Yeah.
So, where do you think you would have landed if you had not taken that up during COVID?
Oh man, I
Like
have no
what
idea.
where would your what do you think your path would have looked like then? I mean, are you I mean, obviously I know you enjoy what you're doing, but are you
Mhm.
glad that this is the shift that happened? Or are
Oh,
you
I'm
still or do you still feel like you're acclimating and
yeah, I'm still acclimating a little bit. But I am so it's always been in the back of my mind that I wanted to have a tea house someday, and it's I was just like exploring different business models and the economics of pouring tea and selling tea and balancing that out with paying employees and rent and it was just a lot and I was like I started getting disheartened but I knew I wanted that like that was always in the back of my mind. It's like I really want to have like a physical tea house. Um, and there was some ideas in the back of my mind too of like, oh, I can make my own tea trays. Like 5 years ago, I was in San Francisco, and when I was there, I visited Red Blossom, and they have beautiful stone tea trays. And
Ooh.
I saw those, and that's what kickstarted. Like, I can make these. Like, someone should be making these in the U.S. Um, and so that was always in the back of my mind, but it was just like, it was like preparation and like some of the background work, also like the opportunity where like my life was up in the air. And so like this new opportunity presented itself. But if that didn't present itself, I was looking at going back to grad school possibly, because I wanted to do something beneficial with my time during the lockdown. Um, but yeah, this is something else that not many people know about me in the tea world is my trajectory before COVID was actually starting a sports business.
Oh.
Um, yeah, so I was working at REI, which is an outdoor um, sports equipment retailer, mainly for like camping and hiking and stuff like that. But my other passion besides tea is Irish sports. Um, so it's not to be confused with the Highland games that you see in Scotland, where everyone's wearing the kilts, right? Those guys are something else. I don't know if you've ever seen the Highland games,
I,
but like they're
I
throwing
have.
logs. Like,
They're
oh,
they're they're wild. So I'm very very Irish. Like,
oh, nice.
very very Irish. I am not familiar with Irish sports.
Yeah, you have an Irish name like Cleary. Definitely, I.
So my name when they got to Ellis Island was McIntyre,
Okay.
and and they were like, that sounds too Irish, so we're gonna give you Cleary. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, I think it's equally as Irish, but
yeah, it is.
what are what are some Irish sports? Like, what is a
Yeah. So the sport that I mainly play is called hurling, and with an H, not to be confused with curling. It is a field sport that looks like a mixture between baseball, lacrosse, and hockey.
ooh?
It's hard to describe, but imagine it's like field hockey, but in the air. And I had a feeling this would come up in our conversation, so I have some props. So
I
this is the stick used in the sport.
Wow.
It's a flat paddle, a little bit less than 3 feet long, and yeah, you use the stick to pick the ball up off the ground, and you can put the ball in your hand, run with it, and then you can toss it in the air and then swing at the ball. So that's where it's like I mentioned, like it's similar to baseball in a way. So this was my passion, and what I was going to do is build a business around growing this sport in the U.S. and then eventually use my engineering to make products for this sport. And then COVID hit, and team sports just stopped, and I was like, "Crap, what do I do?"
Wow,
Yeah,
that's what a pivot.
yeah.
That's a monumental pivot. Is that something that you ever think? Is that something you'd reconsider going into or revisiting, or are you so happy on the track you are now that that's what you're focusing on? And
Yeah, that's a good question. I've definitely tabled the efforts to grow this sport at a national level for now. Um, but
it's
once
a big undertaking. Like,
it is,
that is not a small feat. That is huge.
yeah, yeah. So my plan was like just
So we apologize. I'm working with the new, apparently new Zoom requirements for how long they allowed the video to record, and I'll start over again.
north.
Okay, sorry guys for the technical difficulties. Zoom's got some new requirements that I'm still trying to figure out. We were on the topic of Shawn's Irish sports business, and then sort of deciding to shelve that. And so I guess we can pick up with the direction that you are now heading in since deciding to shelve that venture.
Yeah, yeah. So an interesting journey of like trying to like push myself to keep working on it amidst the pandemic in 2020. Um, so yeah, I eventually kind of like let that go. And the beautiful thing about like letting that go allowed woodworking to enter my life. Um, but fast forward to today, since I launched this business in December of 2021. It's a relatively new venture, so my attention is fully on this to get this up and going and prove that this is a viable business model. And then once I have the time and energy, I'd love to revisit my hurling business because, I mean, since that's a very obscure thing and I knew it wouldn't bring any money in for a few years, that's something I can't really pursue at the moment. But I'm still coaching and I'm still playing. So at least like I'm now that COVID in my area is kind of subsiding a little bit, we can get back to quasi normal
Yeah,
life.
how I mean, here in upstate New York, like we're not congested like New York City is. Like we're pretty spread out. So like we've been at a state of normal pretty much for like a really really long time. Um have you guys just sort of started to get used to like team stuff again, and is that semi new for you guys?
Yeah, that's pretty new. We met up a little bit last fall, but there's still some kind of like hesitancies there. And I coached the team at CU Boulder, and so I was like kind of working with the students because the school still had mask mandates and all that stuff. And so it was like kind of weird to host practices and but not like make it a requirement for people. And just check like the constantly checking in on people, like if you've been in contact with somebody, don't come to practice. And um, but it's been pretty normal here in Colorado, especially compared to like the West Coast or like any major city. Colorado's been relatively low key, I would say. I also dig you're wearing the
uh,
Colorado shirt today.
so seriously, I was first of all, so it's like 85 degrees here today. It's super hot. And so I was going through my clothes after I showered and I was like, what am I going to put on? I was like, I want something that's like breezy because I was like, I don't want anything that's like too, because it's
Mhm.
super hot out. And then all the shirts I was looking at were like fitting. So I'm like fitted, 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 fitted. And then I got to this one and it's a Colorado shirt, but it's advertising the T spot.
Oh, okay, nice,
Um, and so I was like, and I knew you were from Colorado, so I was like, this is fitting. I was like, I should wear this.
perfect.
Yeah, dude, I've been to
Yeah,
Colorado once, and it was the first time in my life I've ever had an actual epiphany. Yeah. So
really.
okay, all my friends were away at college. I didn't go to college, so I was sort of bumming around Thanksgiving time, and my family had like other stuff going on, and for whatever reason, I was like, didn't have any Thanksgiving plans, which isn't a huge deal, but I was telling that to a friend of mine who's living out in Colorado, out in Denver, and they were like, "Hey, I mean, if you want to look up a plane ticket, you're more than welcome to come here." So it was like a week away. So I just for giggles, I went to priceline.com and searched flights, found a round trip for like $300
Okay, right around
the
Thanksgiving.
week before I booked it. Dude, I'm
Jeez.
telling you. So it was truly this like the universe is telling you to go here. So I went, I had fun, blah blah blah, and then the one friend I was staying with on like the third day or whatever, we were just sort of bumming around. She's like, "Oh, why don't you take you up to Red Rocks and then you can, we'll go check out Red Rocks, and then you can at least at the top of that, then you can just see kind of the mountain range." And she's like, that just for someone who's out of town and you never been here, she goes, that'd be
Mhm.
cool. So I'm the way she got me to really want to go was that she said on the way there was a Sonic. I had never. I had never had Sonic before, and I really wanted to. And she was like, "Well, yeah, there's a Sonic on the way," and I was like, "I'm in."
That just like pushed you over the edge just to like to the point of
Right,
like, all
where I
right, we're
was
going.
like, okay, I'll do a little hiking or whatever. So we go to Red Rocks. That's obviously awesome. I mean, a venue that's carved into a giant red rock. I mean, it's wild. And then you go in the
Mhm.
little visitor area and you see all the flyers of all the bands and acts and stuff that have played there, and you're like, everyone in the world has played here. So like, so then that's
Right.
cool. You're almost getting like willies because you're like, well, just of all the famous stuff that's gone on here, that's so cool. But then we go up a little bit, and I I just remember standing up at that first like this like checkpoint that's just right above where the theater is, and I'm looking out at the mountain range, and I mean, holy, it was un it just a so a mountain is huge, right? But mountain upon and then mountains as far as you can see, and it
Hmm.
just it was it was such a like belittling moment that to this day I get like chills whenever I think about that, because it was just such a like uh that true feeling of like, oh, you're tiny, like like
Hmm.
human beings are like one of the tiniest things about this planet, like. And so it was, and I've seen natural beauty before, but I don't know, not on that scale. And so it's not like I
Hmm.
had any like giant like all of a sudden I knew what I wanted to do with my life after that, but it was just this moment that my brain was like, this was a very significant occurrence. Um, and then on
Right. Yeah, like in the true sense of the word awesome. Like that was just like an awe-inspiring moment,
very,
sounds like.
and the whole time in Denver, I had a great. We went to Boulder. We went to I love Colorado. I really, really do. It's a really, really nice spot. People are unbelievably nice there. Um, being from New York, we our attitude is kind of crabby. It's like that's just like part of like the whole New Yorker deal. The
Mhm.
Colorado deal is like people are just genuinely interested in you. Like I can't tell you how many people while I was there were just like, "Hi, are you from around here?" And like, "Oh, if you're not from around here, if you need some time to kill, there's this spot you really should check out." And it's like people were just so helpful and extra nice and stuff that it was beyond the scenery. It was just a very beautiful place to visit. I had a very, very positive experience. Have you lived there? Have you lived there
You
your
bet.
whole life?
No, I actually grew up in Seattle. So quite opposite from the East Coast in some ways, where East Coast can be like a little
Mm-hmm.
aggressive.
Yep.
West Coast, or at least Seattle, Pacific Northwest, can be passive aggressive, where people put their heads down and they don't want to talk to you or look up or make eye contact. Um, but yeah, after I came out to here for school, I fell in love with the area, got too used to the sun, I think. Couldn't go back to those dreary winters.
Yeah.
Just couldn't do it.
Yeah. Our winters here are relatively rough. But that's the only like natural disaster thing we have. Like we here in upstate, we don't really get tornadoes. We don't get affected really by hurricanes. We don't really have much fire issues. Like so, like if I'm to live here and deal with the winters, if that's my main like weather thing I have to worry about each year, I'm okay with that. The like
Right.
I
Yeah.
look at the wildfires, and I look at, and that's, oh,
Yeah.
that's so terrifying to me that it's another reason of why I never moved to the West Coast.
Yeah. Yeah. And the wildfires in Colorado are just getting worse. Like this year, we haven't even hit summer yet, and it's already been horrendous. It's just so dry, and the really high winds. Because in Colorado, there's like really large temperature fluctuations, And with that, it drives, air currents. And so like even just yesterday or 2 days ago, it was like 70-mile-an-hour winds. And then you get alerts on our phones now, about like, high fire warnings. And did you hear about what happened late December, like right before
I
New
don't
Year's?
think so. What?
Just just on the southern part of Boulder, this giant fire started out of nowhere because it was like, I think it capped out between like 80 and 100-mile-an-hour winds. It was really dry, and yeah, fire started and it spread so fast that they were unable to control it, and it burned down hundreds of homes in less than 24 hours. Because most of the wildfires you hear about are like they're out in the mountains, out in nowhere. But this started like right near a heavily like populated area, um, which is crazy because like Boulder was like number one place to live, and the town over from it's Louisville. It's like number one place to retire, and it's just like it's just wiped out. Um,
It,
yeah, it's been tragic.
oh, it just, and then like you have friends that live in these areas, and you're just like, oh God, please, whatever direction whatever you put out, whatever good vibes you can for whatever person, you dig through your brain and like, who do I know that's in California? You try to like just say a little like thought in your head about them because
Mhm,
it's like, or Colorado or wherever, the issue is, but it's like,
mhm.
man, I it's something that it's why I could never. It's one of those things that where everybody's like, why won't you want to live on the West Coast? There's all the, yeah, but for me, the I don't consider myself ultra materialistic, like in like a bad way, but I care about certain things, like certain
Mhm.
things that you have from when you were a kid, that you keep a little box of stuff that's important to you from your life. The thought that if you're choosing to live in certain areas of the United States, that basically what you're saying is that you have to be aware by moving there that everything you own pretty much, it has to be replaceable, or you don't, you just go, oh well, it's gone. And like for me,
Mhm.
like, maybe like pictures of my nana or like something like that, like that, to me, that's personally, to me, that's not replaceable. Like that, my
Right.
memory is not enough for me for something like that. There's not, my dogs, the safety of them, like there's just, and there's no insurance payment that you could give me that could replace that. Well, I mean,
Right.
you being out, I mean, in at least a state that's being more affected by this, how do you feel about that? Like, what are your thoughts personally if you find out that you're in the line of fire? Like,
Yeah. So that fire I brought up, it was actually spreading to it was getting kind of within a few miles of where I was doing all my woodworking at my friend's garage, which is now where I live. So um, I live now between Denver and Boulder in a town called Westminster. But I was watching it because the evac zone was getting closer and closer and closer, and I was like, oh, if it burns down, like it's my friend's tools and maybe some lumber. But then it dawned on me is like I have a box full of old woodworking tools that were like my great grandfathers and great great grandfathers. I'm like, man, that's not irreplaceable at all. Like, sure, I can get antique hand planes, but it's like, ever since starting woodworking, I was like, oh, my dad's side of the family, they're all woodworkers, and it's like these things get passed down. Um, so that was a little stressful, but now that I live a little bit away from the mountains, from the foothills, the fire danger is a little bit less, but it's still in the back of our minds. But one of the things that I wanted to do, um, well, if you're ever out in Colorado, or if anyone watching you ever in the Denver Boulder area, first of all, hit me up. You are always welcome over for tea. But there's this beautiful tea hut, um, that is just in the foothills outside of Boulder, and a fire came through, I think, in 2011, and someone was able to buy the property for cheap. But there are some trees still standing there that were killed in the fire. like that tray that I showed you earlier, that one uh, was killed in the fire but didn't burn. Whereas like this tea scoop that I have here, this one you can see it's black on the outside because this was killed by the fire. And so part of the
Wow.
things I want to do with my woodworking is give back. Whereas like if I built like I want to make things that were from like a fire instance, and then like a large percentage of the proceeds go towards like an organization that is helping with reforesting, but also like one of the big issues with fires, forest fires, is everything's so dry and no one is going around and cutting down all the trees that are dead, and it's just like fodder for the fire. That's a big issue in Colorado where beetles just go in and kill the trees from the inside and they dry out. And once those things like
Once a
get struck by lightning, it's game over.
I always if people have never like I always equate it to have you ever seen someone light an old Christmas tree? Like that's like
Right.
a kind of like semi backwoodsy thing up here. It's like people will save their Christmas tree until the summer, and then when everyone's having a barbecue
Oh,
and the sun goes down, they just they do it safely, but they just torch it.
mhm,
And if
right.
you've never, I mean, you're not adding accelerant or anything, just a dry pine tree. If you just hold a lighter to it, will not only catch fire, but the fire that will exude from it will be so strong that it, I mean, first time I saw this happen, the flame was shooting twice as high as the tree was.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I was like, wow. So then like when I start learning about like this, like I start going, oh wow, forest fires. Yeah, that's a serious thing. You really start working through it in your head. You remember that. Oh, remember when that Christmas tree? Oh my God. And like
Yeah.
trees die and that's expected. And even with some areas like out in the West, there are ways to do controlled burns that are good for the earth. But because of how stuff either is manicured or isn't manicured, or areas that aren't, areas that are, it's a powder keg, or it's like a minefield.
It is. Yeah. So yeah, one of the things that I want to do with this is like turn more attention to like forest maintenance to help prevent these wildfires from hurting any more people, reducing the amount of pain that they cause, because it is a natural occurrence.
Yep.
And we as humans, we can't fight nature, but we can work with it. And one of the things I want to do is like you asked earlier, like, do I grab wood if I'm and it's like, yeah, I love to grab wood wherever I'm at, and then use that as a way to give back to the earth, kind of like um, I equate it to a little bit to like a Native American philosophy of like, if I'm taking from the land, I want to give back to the land. Um, but also like, thinking about it just in a purely logical sense of like being a woodworker, I want to be able, I want there to be wood for future woodworkers. And so, yeah, I want to like add to this, like, I don't want to just take from this cycle. I want to add to it and help more trees grow in a healthy way.
I
And
like that because it's very easy to just go, hey, yeah, I make these wood. I just go into the forest there. I grab a bunch of wood and I make a bunch of trays. I make a bunch of money. This is great. And then you know what I mean. It's just
mm,
purely this like, hey, it's like I'm just getting this for free, and I'm just making profit, and just being jolly about that. But I guess there's nothing really wrong with that. But I guess I really love hearing somebody who's not only doing stuff with such intention as you are in what, like, you're putting intention to what you're creating, but even around just the business and how you want things to operate, and the fact that when you are aware that your materials are taken from the earth and that you really are making a very conscious effort to, in whatever way you see that you can, give back. I mean, that's equally as monumental and impressive as the wares that you're making. Like,
yeah,
I
thank
mean,
you.
it's easy, and especially in a day where most people are hurting for money, profit sometimes it rules your brain, and
Totally.
sometimes it has to. Sometimes it's out of survival, but and so it's super easy to just fall into that mindset and just forget about stuff like giving back. But it's it humbles me to talk to people like you, because it reminds me in times where I'm not giving back, or I feel like I could be doing more. Like I look back on conversations like this and I sort of go like, even if I'm not like beating myself up, it's just sort of pondering the question like, is there something else you could be doing right now? Not adding something else onto your list per se, but like, is there some other little benefactor that you can create where somebody else is going to be help benefiting from what you do? And the more that
Mhm.
I think along those guidelines, ends up being the better I do, because I think even with like with my business, I think the clearer my intentions and the more upfront I'm being, the better I do.
Mhm. That's great to hear that, like, by doing that, you're getting positive feedback from that, because sometimes when people um, go down this path of like kind of what you're doing, it might take a while for you to see any results. Um, but yeah, it's when I started thinking of it in that way of like giving back, it's like I I didn't want to present it to myself as a way that could instill guilt of like I could be doing more, I should be doing more. It's like it's a fine line. It's like showing some compassion, but also like I want to have some drive and motivation to like help and make things better. And I think growing up in this time where we look around and it's like, you know, things are happening to the environment. I'll keep it very broad, but like things are happening, and it's like there are some things that I could probably do about that, and I'll do my best. But at the end of the day, it's like realizing I'm only one person, because I've noticed this a lot of people living in Colorado, because like I see it all around me where people take on almost too much responsibility, and it instills a lot of guilt.
Yes.
I would
There's a
think.
lot of that in New York too.
Um, hmm,
Just
interesting. Yeah,
people
I
that
could see that in
just,
New York.
they feel the need to take on everybody's battles, which is noble, but at the same time, it's like you're gonna run yourself thin real quick.
Hmm. Yeah, and then it's not benefiting anybody when you burn
And
out.
that's what I found, is that when I push myself too hard, or when I'm just thinking about business too much, that is when my business doesn't do well.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, in that regard, it's like I need to figure out different ways to like turn my brain off and have space to do nothing instead of reaching for the notebook. Oh, I have this idea. It's like, yeah. Being a business owner, I feel that where it's just like the brain's always going.
Even with just like Instagram, about like some days, like I'll be like, oh, I haven't posted in like 2 days or so. I really should run upstairs and take a photo. Sometimes now I'm stopping myself and I'm going, who gives a shit? Like, people really aren't going to
Mm-hmm.
care if you don't post today. Like, they're going to be more, they're just going to be happy when you do post and they see your post. They're not going to, nobody is really thinking like, oh, Jeff didn't post today. Like, honestly, I would
Mm-hmm.
have to assume that almost no one thinks that. And that's not a diss to me. That's just like, that's not realistic, but it's like what I put in my own head is like this justification of, oh, this is why you need to go live today, or you need to, it's like, oh, I really don't.
Right. Well, because we're surrounded, especially with social media, we're surrounded by all this expert marketing advice. Oh, you need to post once or twice a day and all these things. And yeah, just I mean the feed is endless. So if you don't post for a week, their Instagram's gonna fill it up with somebody else.
Yeah.
That's cool what I kind of realized too. And like that releasing that pressure, because like I want to focus on creating. I don't want to focus too much of my time on like on
Right.
marketing.
Like, you have to
Um,
promote what you do to a certain level, but like, you're right. How far does that go? And that's a different answer for different people. But for people like you and me, yeah, it's like, I don't want to. I am never a person to sit down and go, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy, 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 buy. Forget
Mhm.
them, like whatever they're selling. No, no, no. Come over here, buy what I have. That is not
Right.
within my nature. Like I am well more my nature is more so like, well, if you want to spend your money over there, that's okay. Like I I just don't feel that way. And when I feel pressured into doing that, I tend to not do it well. Like
Mhm.
that
Yeah, me
type of
too.
like promotion, like a strictly like marketing thing. Like
Yeah. So how do you how do you approach that? Like when you're selling your tea, like how, because for me personally, like if I'm selling like my friend's glass blown teacups, it's so much easier for me to promote this, to be like, check out my friend Chuck, like he does amazing glass blowing. But then when it comes to like my own products or tea that I'm sourcing, I it's almost like I come up to this wall and I'm like, I feel this resistance. Like how do you feel about, like how do you approach that? Because like we need to be able to like market so that we can keep doing what we're doing, right?
right.
um
It's just hard. It's like I'll tend to just I think honesty is the most important thing. Like I'm not going to carry a tea that I don't believe in, and if I carry a tea, I decided to carry it for specific reasons. So I just try to reiterate to people what I like about it and what I think about it in terms of its value, and not in terms of like money, but just like this is why this is something that's maybe something you're interested in. And it's more so like leaving breadcrumbs, and if they take it, then that's cool, but not really taking it like too like you can't force it on anyone. So
mm-hmm. No, I
I
like
just try
that.
to be honest. I just try to, if I'm selling something, then the reason I'm selling it is because I think it's got value, because it's something that's got something special to it. So I feel that if, as long as I go by those rules, as long as I'm not lying to people about what something is or isn't, then I'm pretty confident in what I'm selling.
Nice. Yeah, and after I discovered your business, I think about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, um, I kind of got those vibes from you versus like certain other tea companies that might, you know, do a lot of over promotion of their own products or focus on the health issues, or like you see that on Instagram a lot with healthy teas or whatever. But like I never got that sense of like ingenuine marketing from you. So I think you're doing a
I
really good job
appreciate
there.
that. It's just been a,
I like hearing the behind, like the under the surface like motivators
yeah,
behind it.
because there's a lot. And then there's, and like, there is a lot of people are like, over the years have been like, I want to start a tea business. Like, what does it take? And I was like, you really have to just, it's a big devotional thing. Like, you have to really, really want this to have it happen, or it doesn't really work out. Um, you can
Mm-hmm.
have money, you can have resources, but if you don't have the personal, like, burning heart desire to promote good tea, then I feel like it'll only go so far. Um, on that note, we
Totally.
are running out of time for the running out of
Mhm.
actual time this time. So I want to thank you a ton for joining me. I mean, this conversation has been absolutely phenomenal. If people want to get a hold of you, what's the way you prefer to be contacted? Instagram or?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm fairly active on Instagram. My account is wovenroots_tcrafts. My website is also wovenroots.com. Um, and yeah, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I was really excited when you reached out. I was like, oh yes, I'd love to talk. I just love talking with tea people. Um, and yeah, I've been following your podcast for a little while, so I was like, oh, I get to be a guest. Like this is so
Oh,
exciting.
I'll definitely have
Yeah.
to have you back, because it's I mean, we've gone past the 55 minutes, so I could keep going for a while, but then it's going to be a 5 hour
Mhm.
podcast. So it's like, Save it for
Totally.
another time. So thank you again. I'll do a last cheers to you, and please stay safe, stay well, and stay humble.
Yeah. Thanks. Take care.